Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Trooper Joe Paul, that's P-A-U-L.
How are you employed, sir?
I am currently employed with Massachusetts State Police.
How long have you been a trooper with the state police?
I have been a trooper for approximately 8.5 years.
And
12.5 years. My apologies.
where is it that you're currently assigned within the state police?
I am currently assigned to our Collision Analysis and Reconstruction section, otherwise known as CARS, our recon.
How long have you had that assignment to the reconstruction of the CARS unit?
That one's for about 8.5 years.
The CARS unit is concerned. How is that divided up into certain regions that you would specifically cover?
Correct. We have four separate regions across the states. We have Southeast, the Northeast, Central, and the Western.
Which of those are you assigned to?
I am assigned to the Southeast.
Geographically, how much territory are we talking about that the Southeast covers?
Anywhere from Boston down to the Cape, Marks, Vineyard, Nantucket, anywhere southeastern part of Massachusetts.
Currently, how many troopers are assigned to this specialized reconstruction unit within your Southeast region?
Within our Southeast region, I believe we have 9 now.
Is there some kind of on-call system that your unit operates?
Yes.
Can you describe that to the jury?
We rotate every day. Our on-calls are for 24 hours from 0700 to 0700 the next day.
Yourself, upon or prior to you entering into the CARS unit, what specialized training do you undergo in regard to crash reconstruction?
So before I got into the unit, I was sent to 3 separate classes. Each class was 40 hours long. So the first class is basic at-scene crash investigation. The next one's advanced crash investigation, and the other one's traffic crash reconstruction.
Each of the trainings that you've been a part of or undergone, is there some certification that you receive in regard to a successful completion of those trainings?
Yes, each one has its own certification.
Since you've been working with the CARS unit over the last several years, what additional specialized training have you received in the area of crash reconstruction?
Since I've been on, I've been into probably about 8 hours of education in the units. That's anything from bicycle crash investigation, human factors. I'm currently certified through Burlap for examiner and a technician. I am a CDR analyst and a CDR technician trainer. Just recently I've attended multiple seminars, and most recently I attended a seminar in Houston on EDR data retrieval.
Among those other trainings that you received, some of those trainings pertain specifically to pedestrian crashes?
Correct.
In addition to the training that you've received through the state police, what professional organizations do you belong to in regard to crash reconstruction?
Yes. I am currently part of NAPARS, which is the National Professional Accident Reconstruction Section. I'm also certified through ACTAR, which is the Accreditation Commission for Traffic Accident Reconstruction.
If I can focus specifically just for a moment on the ACTAR certification, can you explain to the jury what goes into that and as that certification is concerned? How does one obtain it?
Okay. First thing you do is you got to submit an application to ACTAR to be allowed to take the test. And part of it, you got to tell them how much education you've had, how many crashes you investigated, basically anything within the crash investigation world. And once they find that you're accepted to take the test, then you got to set up a time for the test. We did it as a section throughout our state, and the test is a 2-part test. It's a practical and theory portion of the test. Each part's 4 hours long, and you got to pass both portions to be certified through ACTAR.
So there's a written exam and a practical portion of the test as well?
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury the practical portion? What is that?
The practical portion is you basically have to analyze a collision. So they give you a simulated crash, and you have to go through and document the evidence. You have to answer a series of questions based on that specific crash, so where you can find the speeds, the distances, times, and everything else related to that collision.
You successfully completed and received that certification, sir, is that correct?
That's correct.
How long ago was it that you first received your ACTAR certification?
In 2019.
How long has that been perpetuity, or is there a continuing educational component attached to it?
There is a continuation component attached to it. The test is certified for 5 years, and within those 5 years, you still have to maintain a certain amount of education to reapply for ACTAR again.
That ACTAR examination, are you familiar with the success rate or the passing rates when it comes to that examination?
Correct.
What is it?
It's fairly low. I can tell you within my unit at the time I took it, there were probably 20-something of us that took it, and only 3 of us passed it at the time. Yeah, it's not a very high pass rate.
Over the course, let me ask you this. When you first enter into the CARS units, you go through the training and then you are on call and get sent out on the road by yourself, or how does that work?
No, you first get initially assigned to a field training officer, and then at that point you shadow the field training officer to various crashes.
Is there any set time period for how long that shadowing process goes on for?
It's not really a set time. It's more based on experience, on how many crashes you go to and how much experience you have in the field. Then they basically, if they feel that if you're deemed qualified, then they'll send you on the road on your own.
Over the course of your years within the cars of the reconstruction unit, approximately how many crashes have you responded to and investigated? As of
now, I've been to approximately 196 crashes. I've probably assisted another 100, 150 crashes.
Of those responded to investigated, if percentage-wise or number-wise, approximately how many of those have been crashes involving pedestrians?
I know I've been to approximately 55 pedestrian crashes. I've assisted others on pedestrian crashes also, 55 out of 196.
Now, if I could, turn your attention to January 29, 2022. Do you recall that date?
I do.
At some point over the course of that date, were you contacted by somebody in regard to a pedestrian collision that occurred in the town of Canton?
I was.
Do you recall who was it that first reached out, or how did you first become aware of this?
My Sergeant Brian Mahoney, was the one who called me at the time.
Initially, your involvement was understanding the initial request for your involvement in this case.
My initial request was to image the airbag control module, do inspection, test the vehicle, and map the scene out.
Now, you've used that term a couple of times, and if I could just ask you to explain it a bit for the jury. When you say an airbag control module or an ACM, what is that, and what do you understand that term to mean in the context of crash reconstruction?
The ACM is the module in a car that controls the airbags and the seatbelt retentioners.
What you were referencing before being a CDR, having taken CDRs and being a CDR instructor, what relationship does the CDR have to ACM?
It's just the crash data retrieval software. It's the software that we use to image or download an airbag control module.
Can you explain to the jury the process of physically how that's done? What are you doing to the vehicle in order to download that information?
Yes, there are two ways really to download a vehicle. It's either one is direct to module or just direct to the vehicle through the DLC port or the diagnostic link connector. The direct to module, we don't use the direct to module if a vehicle had no power. Then we would have to go directly find the module inside the vehicle and go right to that specific module. But if the car has power, we would go direct to the DLC port, which is the same port that you see when you're like a technician would do the diagnostics on a car. They would plug underneath the steering wheel, and then we'll get there, extract the information from there.
Once that information is extracted, what training have you received in regard to reading or interpreting the data that's extracted from it?
Yes, I've been certified as a CDR analyst, and I've taken 2 classes on it now.
Sir, turning your attention to February 1st, 2022. On that date, where did you go in relation to your investigation in this case?
I went to the Canton Police Department.
At some point prior to that, were you made aware, or did you research into what the weather was like around the time? What was reported to you initially as around the time that the crash occurred?
Before that, I know it was snowing and turned to a blizzard at the time.
Initially on February 1st, 2022, where did you go?
On February, to Canton Police Department.
Sir, at some point in time on that date, did you also have occasion to go to a residence or a street called Fairview Road in the town of Canton?
I did.
Specifically, there was an address that you were directed to, is that correct?
That's correct.
Who did you go there with?
I believe it was one of the Canton police officers, Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, I think his name was. I met him there.
Without anything specific as to what was told to you by Lieutenant Gallagher, what was the purpose of having Lieutenant Gallagher there with you at that time?
He was going to show me where basically the evidence that they have at that point was.
In addition to that, were you also able to, are you familiar with another specialized unit within the state police called the CERT team?
I am.
At some points, did you have access to certain diagrams created by Lieutenant O'Hara within the CERT unit?
Yes.
Up on the screen as Exhibit 136.
I do.
Is this the diagram that you were able to view from created by Lieutenant O'Hara from the CERT team?
Yes, it was.
What's contained, at least from this overhead shot, is a fair and accurate portrayal of the roadway or the conditions of the roadway, weather at the time that you went out there on February 1st.
Correct.
Do you recognize those, sir?
I do.
What do you recognize those to be?
They are pictures that were in my report. They're Google images of the roadway.
One facing from the northbound direction, one facing from the southbound, is that correct?
That's correct.
Using that laser pointer.
All right. So this is Ferry Road. It's facing northbound. 34 Fairview Road would be onto the left in this area.
With regard to the roadway, when you went there, any observations or what did you note about the roadway surface or markings on the road, condition of the road?
There's no significant difference.
The roadway material, were you able to observe whether or not it was sort of asphalt, concrete or anything
Right.
else?
Asphalt roadway.
Markings within the roadway, what if any observations did you make of those?
There was double yellow stone line, white fog lines on both sides of the edge of the road. Is that what we're going after? The roadways. So on to, as you look at the picture, the left side has asphalt curbings. These are about 5 inches tall, same on both sides, and there's a sidewalk along the right side of the roadway here. Correct.
Direct the jury's attention to what effect?
Yeah, so this is the southbound. Fairview would be on the right side here.
With regard to the roadway, Fairview Road, what did you note in regard to postings regarding the speed limit on that particular roadway?
Yes, the posting for the speed limit is 30 miles per hour. At this area, it's only posted 30 miles per hour for northbound operators. I believe it was like 19 Fairview Road is posted in front of. For the southbound operators, it was not posted.
So for a northbound operator, that would again be someone where the residents of 34 Fairview Road will be on the left-hand side of the road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
With regard to the width of the lanes, or what measurements did you take in regard to the lanes or the roadway itself?
Yeah, each travel lane was approximately 12 feet, and the overall width was approximately 27 feet.
Measurements being conducted with regard to the scene, what did you use or employ to make those measurements, or what devices?
Yes, I mapped the scene with it's called a Leica GNSS GPS total station, and I also used a drone.
That's a UAS, is that correct?
Correct.
The drone?
Yes.
With regard to each of those GPS mapping and the drone, have you received any specialized training in regard to employment of each of those tools?
Yes, I have been certified to use the Leica, and I've also have a Part 107 license for the drone.
Starting with the Leica or the GPS, if you could explain to the juries what that is and how you use that device in order to, as you've termed it, map the scene.
Yes, it's essentially what surveyors would use to make roadways. It uses satellites and GPS data plus cell phone data to make marks on the roadway, or actually not marks, but just mark points in the roadway that are within millimeters of the device.
With regard to the drone device, sir, explain to the juries how that works and how that's used.
Yeah, so the drone, and we fly the drone around the area. We set it to set up a grid pattern to fly around the scene. While it's flying this grid pattern, it takes a series of photographs, and these photographs are also GPS marked. So once we get all the photographs in, we throw it into a program, and the program will essentially stitch us all together. Then once we get that picture, we throw it into a diagramming system.
That diagramming system, have you also received training in regard to utilization of that diagramming system?
Yes, I have.
The one that you're currently using within the car's unit, what is that diagramming system or software called?
That's IMS 360.
Do you recognize those, sir?
I do.
What do you recognize those to be?
These are the diagrams that we print out through the program.
The last one is the drone image, is that correct?
Yes, they're all drone images. The last one is just one that was put into my diagram, and I labeled it as a drone image.
In regard to the roadway itself, what else beyond lane width and overall width, what if any other measurements did you take there?
So we took measurements for the evidence.
Elevation or incline of the roadway, what if any measurements did you take in regard to that?
Yeah, so we took the elevation and roadway measurements, or the elevation for the roadway.
Where in relation to the residents at 34 Fairview did you take that? Sort of the entire street or just in the general area of that specific address?
The general area of that specific address.
How is measurement regarded to elevation or incline? What kind of tool do you use for that?
We have a level to digital level that we'll place on the roadway, and we'll get a measurement from that.
With regard to the measurements that you took of the elevation or the incline in the roadway, what significance did you find from that?
So this roadway had approximately plus or minus 1 to 2 degrees.
So nothing significant, is that fair to say?
Nothing significant, yes.
Sir, through your training and experience as a crash reconstructor, are you familiar with the term related to crash reconstruction called roadway evidence?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what your understanding of that term is and what types of things could be termed as roadway evidence?
Roadway evidence is anything that's related to the collision you're investigating at the time. It could be anything from vehicle debris, gouge marks, tire marks, anything that's related to a vehicle or whatever type of crash you are investigating. It could be vehicle or pedestrian.
So anything from either the vehicle or pedestrian as well, is that correct?
Correct.
So pieces from a vehicle, holding items from a, is that correct?
Yes.
Both your review of the CERT team diagrams as well as speaking with members of the Canton Police Department, were you able to then plot certain pieces of roadway evidence onto those diagrams that you that I just showed you a few moments ago?
Yes, I was.
Familiar also through your training and experience when it comes to pedestrian crashes, of physics or kinematics of how pedestrians interact with vehicles in the course of a collision?
Yes, I am.
I'm going to ask you just a couple of terminology questions when it comes to items that are involved in a collision. Simple Newtonian physics, first of all. Can you explain what that is to the jury and how that pertains to any collision between two objects?
The first law?
Yes.
Yeah, that's when an object stays in motion or it stays at rest, will stay at motion or rest until acted upon by an outside force.
Are you familiar also with a crash reconstruction term called final rest?
Yes, I am.
Are there different derivations of final rest, controlled final rest versus uncontrolled final rest?
Correct.
Can you explain just first to the jury what final rest means in relation to crash reconstruction, and what differences there are between a controlled final rest and an uncontrolled final rest?
Yes, the final rest is what we use for describe the area where a pedestrian came to stop after the collision. It's immediately after the collision. This is where they first stopped. Or a vehicle, usually after collision, it's where this vehicle first stopped. A controlled final rest is when an operator actually controls the vehicle to the stop, and as opposed to the uncontrolled final rest is when there is no control. It's usually acted upon by outside forces that will control the vehicle or pedestrian to its final rest.
Trooper, is that what you have before you as the first in that exhibit?
Yes, it is.
Using the laser before you include attention or direction to what significance you have noted within this diagram.
Okay. Use the pointer?
Yes.
Okay. So in this time, I labeled each part of evidence. So right here would be the pedestrian's final rest. They're all, since there's so many put together, everything was labeled with a red arrow that would be pointing to where the final rest is. This is where a glass cup was found. These are the red and clear plastic pieces. That's where they were found. The pedestrian's shoe was found here. The smaller versions here in the light blue is one's a fire hydrant, flagpole. This is a label for the street 34, and obviously the street name Fairview Road here.
Measurements were concerned. What were you able to do to measure between different points of roadway evidence, or specifically from the pedestrian or Mr. O'Keefe's final rest in reference to other items that you have depicted on the diagram?
So in these diagrams, it's hard to see here, but it is a scale diagram. The diagram itself is scale. Once you put a rule up to the actual paper, it's scale. I've also have on here, it's hard to see, but I think it's right here. They're called ground control points. They're little X's on the roadway. They're used for the drones imaging, and using the drone imagings will use those in order to help put all the pictures back together. At the time of this, I measured between each point from ground control point 1 to 2 and put it as approximately 50 feet. And 2 to 3 is 50 feet and 3 to 4 is 50 feet. So there's a second way to measure off the diagram, and also using the program to measure to different points while using the diagram.
Starting with the shoe that you have depicted in this diagram, what was the measurement of the shoe away from Mr. O'Keefe's body?
9 feet.
Do you also have a measurement for how far away the glass cup pieces were from Mr. O'Keefe's body?
Yeah, 1 foot.
For the red plastic that you have labeled on this diagram as A, how far away from Mr. O'Keefe's body was that?
7 feet.
With regard to the directionality, the 9 feet that the shoe was away, which direction was it?
Each point evidence was measured from the pedestrian's final rest. The shoe was 9 feet southeast from the pedestrian's final rest.
If you could, using the laser pointer on the screen, the directionality of support, if you could first direct the jury's attention to where Mr. O'Keefe's final rest is, and then as far as the directionality of southeast from that, where is it?
Okay. So right here, pedestrian's final rest, it's more right there. The shoe is right here, so it would be southeast. I have an arrow pointing north to give an extra.
The glass cup that was 1 foot away, which direction was that?
It was about 1 foot north. I think it was found right next to him. So
the red plastic that you have labeled as A was 7 feet. In which direction was that, sir?
That one was east, so it was right here.
The clear plastic, what was the measurement and what was the directionality for that item, sir?
10 feet southeast, about over here.
The red plastic B.
And that was 12 feet southeast, and that was found right here.
Do you recognize what's depicted up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
If you could, again, using the laser pointer, what significance do you observe in this particular diagram in reference to the roadway evidence?
It's just essentially the same diagram. It's just a closer up version of it. So you have, so you saw the pedestrian's final rest, glass cup, plastic pieces, the shoe. It's all still depicted in the diagram.
You recognize what's up on the screen?
I do.
If you could just describe to the jury what are we looking at in this diagram?
Yeah, so this is just a closer up to the evidence. It's a little smaller scale.
These diagrams are created from photographs that you've drawn. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You recognize what's up on the screen?
I do.
And could you describe to the jury again using the laser pointer to delineate what significance you observed in this drone graph and diagram you have?
This is from my report. It's the same diagram. It has the same amount of evidence on here. There's a house. There's a light pole here. These lines here, which I mentioned earlier, were the edge of the road and the edge of the sidewalk.
All right, Mr. Lally, why don't we pause here for the luncheon recess?
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Direct your attention to what's up on the screen. It's now been marked as Exhibit 587. This is the last in the set of four that I presented before you.
Correct.
The evidence, specifically pieces of tail that are depicted within this diagram, did you put every single piece of taillight that was recovered on January 29th within this diagram?
No, I did not.
It's fair to say you did also not put every piece of taillight that you're aware was recovered over the course of this investigation and depicted in this particular diagram.
That's correct.
This particular area of Fairview Road, understanding that you were there in the daytime, correct?
Yes.
When you were there in the daytime, what, if any, note did you take as to overhead lighting or available ambient street lighting in the area?
Yeah, so on the top corner, I'll try to, right up here, there's a light pole right there, overhead light pole.
With relation to where you've marked the final rest position of Mr. O'Keefe and the other areas of items of evidence that were recovered from the scene, was there any lighting in that particular area?
It wasn't.
February 1st, 22. At some point, you were at the Canton Police Department, correct?
Yes.
Where specifically within the Canton Police Department did you go?
To the back in the garage area.
Within the garage area, what did you do in the garage area?
In the garage area is where we imaged the airbag control module.
I'm sorry, is it fair to say the vehicle, the defendant's vehicle, was located in that garage area?
That is correct.
You imaged that vehicle, and what else did you do to that vehicle that day?
At that point, we just analyzed the damage to the vehicle.
At some point, did you perform any mechanical inspection of the vehicle?
Yes,
Was that day or at some later?
it was that day.
Was that within the garage area itself, or where did you perform the mechanical inspection of the vehicle?
We analyzed a little bit of the steering and the brake pedals while it was sitting in the garage. Then we did testing with it in the driveway next to Canton PD.
Sir, starting with visual inspection of the vehicle, do you recognize those?
I do. They are crime scene photos that I've attached to my report.
Mr. Paul, do you recognize what's up on the screen right now?
Yes, I do. That's one of the crime scene photos that I attached to my report.
What's contained in this, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of the front of this vehicle, looking at it from the passenger side? Do you recognize that?
That's a crime scene photo that I attached to my report with notations that I made on it.
What's contained in this photograph, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed in the rear passenger side area of the defendant's vehicle in the garage on February 1st?
Yes, it is.
Now, within this, if you could, using the laser pointer before you, just direct the jury's attention to what significance you observed in your inspection of this area of the Lexus.
Okay. On the left side here, put down that scratches, and there's a dent there. The broken tail light here was here. There's some scratches on the bottom right rear bumper here. There was glass from a cut back on the bumper.
As far as you make of that in relation to the vehicle itself.
Yeah, it appeared to be from a cup as opposed to any glass that came from the vehicle.
Objection. I'll strike the first part of the answer, but the second part will stand.
I have no objection to the second part. Thank you.
With regard to the dent that you've delineated within this photograph, did you take any measurements from the ground as to where that was located?
Yes, I did.
And how far did you measure the dent to be approximately from the ground?
Approximately 48 to 50 inches from the ground.
What, if any, measurements did you take one part of the vehicle to the other were located?
Yeah, so it was approximately 19 inches from the right side of the vehicle.
Now, the scratches that you were talking about before, where were they in relation?
Right above the dent. I can see right there. As my hand's shaky.
Obviously, also made observations of the driver's side taillight as well.
Yes.
From what you observed of the driver's side taillight versus the passenger side taillight, what observations did you make of the color of the pieces that you found missing from the passenger side taillight?
As compared to the left side of the taillight?
Yes.
On the left side of the taillight, there was red and clear plastic pieces.
Now, the scratch marks along the bumper, did you take any measurements with relation to them?
Yes.
And specifically, did you take measurements from the ground to where they were located?
Yes.
What did you measure those?
They were approximately 27 to 28 inches from the ground.
Trooper Paul, can you talk about a mechanical inspection of a vehicle, just first in general terms? What is it that you're doing to the vehicle in order to conduct that mechanical inspection?
When we do mechanical inspections, we're obviously checking the steering, make sure the steering moves properly, the brake pedals, make sure they are firm, make sure the accelerator pedal moves back and forth. Generally, looking at the tires, make sure there's no issues with the vehicle.
What observations did you make of the vehicle itself? Any defects or anything to do with the braking, the tires, or any of the other areas that you inspected?
We didn't observe any mechanical defects with the vehicle.
With relation to the weight of the vehicle, what analysis or what did you determine as the weight of the Lexus?
The way the Lexus item was on an analysis was just based on I think I have the gross vehicle weighting for the vehicle.
How much did the vehicle weigh according to the gross weight?
I think it was approximately 7,000 pounds.
The lights of the vehicle, and being the tail lights and the headlights, what did you determine those to be? What type of lights were they?
They were LED, both. They were headlights and taillights were both LED.
If you could just expound a little, LED lights, what significance does that have to you, or what kind of lights are LED? How bright are
Well, most comparison to what most people think in car and taillights, where I have the bulbs, where they have the filaments, is more electronically controlled. They send the sensor that will light up, as opposed to a bulb type headlight and taillights.
Now, are you familiar with an organization called NHTSA?
Yes,
What does NHTSA stand for?
it's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
What did you do with regard to NHTSA in respect to this vehicle itself?
We run the vehicle through NHTSA to see if there's any recalls on the vehicle.
What recalls did you discover when you ran this particular vehicle through NHTSA?
There were no recalls.
To be specific, we're talking about this specific vehicle as opposed to just Lexuses in general, make and model, correct?
Correct, yeah, we put the VIN into the system and it will tell you if this vehicle has any recalls to it.
You indicated on February 1st at some point you did some testing with the vehicle, is that correct?
Correct.
Where was that testing done and what did it consist of?
It was done in the parking lot of Canton PD on the same day. We did a forward braking test, a reverse braking test, and a reverse acceleration test.
The parking lot of the Canton Police Station where you did this, what kind of roadway surface was that?
It's an asphalt surface.
So similar to the asphalt surface at 34 Fairview Road, is that correct?
Correct.
What was the condition of the roadway? How dry or wet was these acceleration and braking tests?
It was wet at the time.
Your understanding of January 29th, do that with the asphalt surface in front of 34th Road. What was the condition weather-wise of that roadway surface at the time of this collision?
At the time of the collision?
Yes.
What I understand is it was snowy, so the asphalt road had been fairly wet from snow.
When you conducted these acceleration and braking tests with the defendant's vehicle, what tool or what implement did you use in the course of that testing?
We use a device called a V-Box. This one's a V-Box Sport. The device is attached to the windshield, and then it's also attached by an antenna that goes to the roof. And basically, V-Box, do you want me to explain what V-Box is?
Please.
Okay. So a V-Box is it measures performance for the vehicle. It uses data to measure the speeds and its location. We use that it'll give us how fast we were stopping, a drag factor for the roadway for that specific vehicle and type of road, and acceleration factors. So we attach that to the windshield, just give me a way to check its acceleration and check its performance.
So the V-Box is attached to that vehicle, so what specifically is it measuring?
Yeah, it's using the GPS data to apply its location. So it's measuring its speeds and using the speed and the location, putting that together. Once you use the app through the V-Box and it'll set certain parameters as like you can go, I want 30 miles per hour, 20 miles per hour, 10 miles per hour, and it'll set your vehicle. So when you go to 30 miles per hour, it'll tell you what you're doing at 30, what you're doing at 20, what you're doing at 10, and then it'll know if you're doing braking or acceleration tests. And it'll use those numbers that you have to give you your acceleration factor or braking factor for the vehicle.
The V-Box Sports device that you use, and you've received training as it applies to using that device?
Yes, I have.
Certification as well?
It's usually just training on it.
The V-Box Sport, as it's attached to that vehicle, that's measuring specifically from that vehicle with those tires on that roadway surface that day, correct?
That's correct.
Testing on that day, you did some acceleration or reverse acceleration tests, is that correct?
Correct.
How many of those tests did you conduct?
2.
You describe to the jury how you conducted those tests or what speeds you were using or that process of the 2 reverse acceleration tests that you conducted that day.
Reverse acceleration tests we set the parameters up to at least 25 miles per hour. So what we did is we try to come from a stop at 0 and then press the accelerators all the way about as hard as I could press it and try to go back and see how fast I can get to 25 miles per hour and see what the performance it did at that time.
What kind of data did you receive with the V-Box Sport using during those two reverse acceleration tests?
It gave me an acceleration factor. It gave me its speeds and times and distances that it was at each location.
If you could explain to the jury, when you say acceleration factor, what is an acceleration factor?
It's just a number of how fast the vehicle could travel. And it could be a light acceleration to a medium acceleration, a hard acceleration. They all have a different number that you can use to relate it back to what the acceleration is for that vehicle.
What was the acceleration factor that you were able to obtain with those two reverse acceleration tests?
I believe I had 0.317, I believe.
During the course of those the accelerations that you conducted on that day, who was actually physically operating the vehicle?
I was actually operating the vehicle.
What did you note during your operation of that vehicle during the reverse acceleration test that you conducted?
We also noted the accelerator pedal moved freely. There was no binding. There were no interference from any on the floor. Nothing interfered with the accelerator pedal. It worked as it's supposed to.
When you're doing this reverse acceleration test, are you manipulating the steering wheel at all, or is it a straight line test, or how is the vehicle directed during the test?
Yeah, so I try to keep it fairly straight.
When you accelerated in reverse in a fairly straight fashion with the steering wheel, what did you note about that?
We kept the vehicle fairly straight. It was fairly easy to keep control of.
In addition to the two reverse acceleration tests, what testing did you do with regard to reverse braking?
Yeah, so we conducted two reverse braking tests.
Again, similar, can you describe to the jury, this is also with the V-Box Sport attached, is that correct?
Correct.
So you're obtaining data from that as well?
Yes.
During the course of the reverse braking test, when first data is concerned, how fast were these tests being conducted and what data did you receive from?
Yeah, so the reverse braking one, we try to get up to about 30 miles per hour, and then once we get up to that speed, that's when we apply the brakes, try to brake the brakes fairly hard to try to get the vehicle to stop.
Are you also familiar with the term known as a deceleration factor?
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury what that is?
It's just essentially the opposite of an acceleration factor. This is half a number for how fast the vehicle would slow down.
With regard to the deceleration factor from the two reverse braking tests that you conducted on that date, what figure did you receive from the instrument from the V-Box Sport?
For the reverse braking?
Yes.
I believe this one was gets you a drag factor number for this vehicle to our deceleration factor, which was both are used the same way. This one, it was I think it was 7.1.
Again, you're operating the vehicle during these two reverse braking tests, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
What did you note in regard to the operation of the vehicle when you were conducting these two reverse braking tests?
Yeah, the brake pedal was firm. There was no pulsation from the brake.
In addition, sir, were you able to conduct some forward braking tests?
Yes, I was.
Similar again, could you describe to the jury how you were operating the vehicle during the forward braking?
Yes, essentially the same thing as reverse. If I was going forward this time, I got up to 30 miles per hour, and I would just apply the brakes about as hard as I could apply them till it stops.
Again, are you receiving from the instrument some factor?
Yes, I was.
Did you recall what that was?
Yeah, it was a 0.69.
During the course of your operation of the vehicle during the forward braking test, again, what did you note in regard to the operation of the defendant's vehicle?
Same as before, that brake pedal was firm. There was no pulsation, no issues.
About ACM or an airbag control module, correct?
Correct.
You indicated earlier in your testimony that you had downloaded information from that, is that correct?
Yes.
When you download that information, what do you get from the vehicle? How are you able to read or interpret that data?
In the airbag control model, it's equipped with it's called an event data recorder on EDR. And that data from the EDR, we will use the BODE CDR software and will attach to the vehicle. And that software will basically extract the information or image the information that's in the module. So that information could range from getting us speeds, if there was braking, if there was steering wheel movements, basically like looking for change of velocity. So there's a lot of information around the vehicle.
Do you recognize that document, sir?
I do. This is the document that gets printed out from the airbag control model through the crash data retrieval software.
Sir, when it comes to the CDR printout, or let me ask you this, when it comes to the airbag control module, who is that designed to protect or to apply to in respect to safety measures with the vehicle?
Applies to the occupants inside the vehicle.
This may sound a little terse when I say it, but essentially the airbag control module is typically not designed to protect people on the exterior or the outside of the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
You've been involved in a number of crash investigations involving pedestrians, correct?
Yes.
In this particular case, what useful or significant information were you able to interpret or retrieve from the ACM?
Through the software, there was no data recovered, or no events recovered.
When it comes to pedestrian crashes in general, and there being no data in this case, is that something that's abnormal?
It is not.
Explain to the jury why not.
So what an airbag control module is doing, as it's running, it's constantly monitoring the vehicle. It's looking for like a sudden change of velocity, like a collision. So once it feels that sudden change of velocity, essentially it will wake up, monitor the vehicle, see if there's people wearing seatbelts on, what's the speed of the vehicle, number of different things that it could look for. And all it wants to do is either, do I deploy the airbags, or do I tighten the seatbelts? Most motor vehicle crashes with a car-on-car crash, there will be a higher change of velocity. So that's usually what it's looking for. Pedestrian crash there's not going to be much change of velocity to the vehicle. And that means when they both interact with each other, the pedestrian is not going to change that vehicle's velocity in such a quick manner as, say, two cars would strike each other.
Crash reconstruction in general, are you familiar with the term called delta V?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what that term means? What is a delta V and what does it measure?
So that's what I was saying about the change of velocity. It was a change of velocity. And it's also going to be within a certain amount of time. Change amount of speed within a certain amount of time.
Vehicle as it applies to crashes or collisions involving pedestrians, and I think you said a little bit about this, but what, if any, impact on the velocity would striking a pedestrian typically have?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what that is and how it applies with pedestrian crashes in general?
Momentum is essentially when two objects interact with each other. They come in with momentum and they leave with momentum, with essentially the same momentum. Linear momentum just means something that's in line with each other.
You talked a little bit earlier in your testimony about roadway evidence. When it comes to your experience with pedestrian collisions, what relationship does that linear momentum have in relation to roadway evidence that you would expect to find at a scene of a pedestrian collision?
When a pedestrian strikes a vehicle, they will go in the direction where the vehicle was traveling. So if the vehicle is traveling one way, the pedestrian strikes, it will go essentially that same way, depending on what part that vehicle strikes.
Other items that the pedestrian may either have in their hand or other items of looser fitting clothing. What experience do you have, observations of those on collision scenes involving pedestrian collisions? Yeah,
so it's not uncommon for pedestrians to lose essentially any loose clothing, shoes, belts, hats, anything that's not very strapped on very well, could leave the body.
Directionality is concerned when it applies to that linear momentum that you were speaking of before. Those loosely held or handheld items, or would glasses be included within that as well?
Correct.
So those types of items, direct concerns, what can you tell the jury about that?
Yeah, so they will go in the same direction the pedestrian travels post-impact. We usually use that as a post-impact path of travel for the pedestrian, showing that this is the direction that they would have traveled from where they got struck.
Are you also familiar with the reconstruction terms known as area of impact and point of impact?
Correct.
Can you explain what those terms mean, crash reconstruction context for the jury?
Yeah, so an area impact is essentially the area where the crash happened, where these two vehicles or vehicle pedestrians, where their initial impact happened. Point of impact is the same thing, it's just more down to like that's a specific point at a specific area. Area can mean a little bit broader in that sense.
What are some of is this something that is delineated somewhat, at least by roadway evidence?
Correct.
If you could describe to the jury, what types of roadway evidence that would lead you or any crash reconstructionists to formulate an opinion as to the area of impact?
Yeah, so like I said earlier with the path of travel, so a lot of collisions most of our collisions we start where the final arrest goes, and we follow the debris or the clothing, follow that path back to where it came from. And we know within that area, that's where an area impact would be.
In relation to the evidence that was depicted on the diagrams that were up on the screen before as the exhibits, what relationship would the taillight pieces and the shoe that were recovered from the street in front of 34 Fairview Road have in relation to that area of impact?
Yeah, they were found alongside the roadway. I know that the area impact had been somewhere within the roadway, probably somewhere at the beginning, just prior to the beginning of the first point of evidence that we found.
So somewhere towards the first point of evidence contained within that debris field, is that correct?
Correct.
Sir, are you also familiar with a safety system specifically applicable to Lexus vehicles?
Yes.
Have you seen training in regard to downloading information in regard to that as well?
Yes.
What is that safety system? What is that called?
It's called the Toyota TechStream software.
So the Toyota TechStream is a software similar to the crash data retrieval or CDR software that you were talking about, but just specific to a Lexus.
Toyota and Lexus has software. The TechStream, it's similar in the fact that they both record data to the vehicle. TechStream was created by Toyota for their technicians to diagnose vehicles and use that information to help any kind of mechanical issues that they would have with the vehicle that they can do. When you bring your car to them, they can look at the TechStream and find out what caused the mechanical issue.
The Toyota TechStream data that's available, what kind of data are we talking?
TechStream, yeah, they obviously the diagnosis stuff, so they're looking for any engine defaults or anything else. But they also have what's called a vehicle control history in it.
I missed that. Called what?
A vehicle control history.
Thank you.
The vehicle control history it's basically monitoring people's driving behavior. So it has certain, they call it triggers, that they have listed. When those triggers are met, they will record data related to that trigger.
What type of data, in general terms, what type of data are you able to recover through the Toyota TechStream tool from the vehicle control history?
Yeah, so that each trigger, you can record, it's the same as you get your speeds, brakes, if the accelerator pedal's on, for steering wheel angles, engine RPMs, all the information that you have related to vehicles.
In addition, is it possible with vehicles that have, some vehicles made that are accessible through this Toyota TechStream, including Lexus, which I should say, I'm sorry, so Lexus is manufactured by Toyota, correct?
That's correct.
In some vehicles, Toyota or Lexus vehicles are made by that manufacturer are equipped with camera systems, is that correct?
Correct.
Again, in general terms, what in relation to the camera system is it possible to collect from the vehicle control history?
The camera systems in certain vehicles can record photos, like little grainy black and white photos.
Were you able to recover any black and white photos or photos of any kind from the defendant's vehicle in this case?
I was not.
The physical process of the downloading using this Toyota TechStream tool, can you explain to the juries how that's physically done or what you're doing to the vehicle in order to download that information?
The same kind of same process, just different software as we would for the airbag control module. As I said before, we plug into the DLC port and then up that software program, and we follow the steps and we extract the information from the vehicle.
The extraction of the Toyota TechStream data in this particular case, when was that accomplished?
And for this one, I believe it was February 2nd, 2023.
So a year and a day after you had conducted the braking and acceleration test and inspected the vehicle in the Canton Police Department garage?
That's correct.
So the timing of that being February 2nd of 2023, why was that?
I was at the time of my initial inspection, I didn't really know much about TechStream at that point. So over time, I learned about TechStream. So once I learned about it, and I thought, is this to our case? And I looked more into it and found that it is relevant.
The Toyota TechStream, that applicability or that tool, is that a relatively newer tool in the area of crash reconstruction?
It is getting fairly newer, as in it's getting spread out. It's getting bigger. It first got created on one vehicle in 2014. So it's been slowly trickling into the Toyotas and Lexus vehicles over time, but it's definitely gotten bigger within the past couple of years.
With regard to this information, when you were then able to download that information, you received some data, is that correct?
That's correct.
You mentioned that it goes, or it's measured by triggers, is that correct?
That's correct.
From the data that you were able to obtain from the defendant's vehicle, what type of data were you able to retrieve as it relates to the vehicle control history?
Yes, so this had like a page and a half full of triggers that over the vehicle's time span that it captured.
The triggers, how many triggers did it capture?
It's like a page and a half. I don't know exact numbers of how many triggers that was on each page, but it's at least a good page and a half full of triggers.
Trooper, if I could direct you, I think it's page 9 of your report.
Okay.
How many triggers was it, sir?
Can we count them?
Does he have to count them, Mr. Lally?
No, I don't think he has to count them. Sir, if I could direct you to paragraph 23.
Oh, yeah, so 22 separate triggers. So in my report, it says 22 separate triggers that occurred on odometer mileage 12665 to 12666.
With regard to the mileage that you noted being between miles 12665 and miles 12666, that's 12,665 to 12,666, correct?
Correct.
What was the mileage that you observed on the vehicle at inspection?
12,665.
At the time that you conducted this Toyota TechStream download from the vehicle, what was the mileage at that time?
12,666.
And there's also reference within the vehicle control history data in regard to something called a key cycle. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury what a key cycle is and what are the different things that could trigger a key cycle?
A key cycle is essentially, it's from the ignition cycle. Well, let's take that. So a key cycle is essentially from when the vehicle's off, it's pressed on. It doesn't necessarily need to be running or turned on. It just needs to be turned on and then off again. That'd be one key cycle.
Now, with your analysis in regard to the vehicle control history, what role did the key cycle numbers or what kind of role did that play in your analysis?
It shows me how far away they were from each other, the key cycles were.
How far away in what terms, sir?
So when I turned the vehicle on, when I did my testing, it shows me what key cycle was that I was on when I did those testings, and then the odometer mileage in relationship to that.
Your Honor, may I approach? Do you recognize that, sir?
I do. That is the table from the vehicle control history from my report.
Now, Trooper Paul, what's up on the screen? Is that the exhibit that you have before you?
Yes, it is.
If you could, using the laser pointer before you, just direct the jury's attention to this exhibit and what type of information and where it's located within this exhibit.
Okay. This is the vehicle control history. Every single point here, this is where the triggers are. This is the labels for each trigger. Odometer mileage is on this label here. These are the elapsed time and key cycles. I have noted through arrows here, these were when the vehicle was with us, and a lot of this is related to my testing with the vehicle. And these right before that were the triggers that were prior to those testings.
Within this table, sir, there are two triggers recorded at odometer mile 12,629.
Yes.
So what's the key cycle associated with 12,629?
1,162.
These triggers that are contained at 12,629, that's prior to the...
You have to either come closer or speak up even louder, Mr. Lally.
I will speak louder.
There's no microphone near you. That's the problem for the court reporter.
My issue is, Your Honor, there's no light over here.
All right, so let's turn the light on and then you can ask your question, then we'll turn the light right back off, please, Canton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I apologize. So that odometer mile, the two triggering events at 12,629, correct?
Yes.
That occurs prior to the 12,665, 12,666 during the course of your braking and acceleration test, correct?
Correct.
The mileage difference between those two, did you do that math?
Yes.
What was the mileage difference between the two?
36.
How many key cycles were different between your testing and that odometer reading of 12,629?
2 key cycles.
What information did you have and where did you get it in relation to the defendant's vehicle's path of travel prior to those odometer readings that you noted when you did your braking?
Yeah, so I was told that where she traveled afterwards or prior to that, I was noted their locations, and I used those locations through Google to get a mileage for them. I do. Those are the Google directions. I put them in a table and put in my report.
Paul, do you recognize what's up on the screen as the next exhibit before you?
Yes, I do.
These are, again, if you could explain to the jury what we're looking at here and how you came to these mileage tools.
Yes, when I got the directions, it showed that we got from 34 Fairview Road to 1 Meadows Ave. And when I put that address onto Google, it gave me suggested routes. So I put each suggested route on there and the time it took. So I did that with every direction from 1 Meadows Ave to Waterfall to 12 Country Lane, and 12 Country Lane to 1 Meadows Ave, and 1 Meadows Ave to 345 Country Hill Drive, North Dighton. So I did that for every single one and find suggested routes, so which is labeled in all these boxes here. And then at the bottom here, I did a total distance, and I did a min and the max distance of, and the minimum was 36.1, and the max distance of 38.8.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to take that down for a minute, and I'll see counsel at sidebar, please.
In addition to those distances there depicted in that exhibit, sir, Have you also looked at a mileage or distance between, I'm sorry, the first up there was 34 Fairview Road to 1 Meadows Avenue, is that correct?
That's correct.
That gave you 3 different routes of travel, is that correct?
Yes,
The minute of the max was 2.2 to 2.6.
correct.
If you were to add that as an additional distance traveled to the 36.1 to 38.8 that you had calculated, how much of a difference does that make?
Between the two min-maxes,
Yes.
only at 2.7.
Your analysis that we're about to discuss, adding in that approximate 2 points, whatever miles, how much of a difference does that make to your analysis and ultimate conclusions in regard to the VCH or vehicle control history data?
I was going later, but so the 36 is just within the realm that she could have traveled 36. The odometer mileage is odometer mileage, so 36 is 36. That's what's on the vehicle. So within the realm of possibilities that the vehicle could have traveled 36 miles after the 2 triggers that are in this vehicle.
That minimum and max of 36.1, 38.8, what relationship does that have to the difference in the odometer readings that you observed between when you conducted the braking test and when you observed these 2 triggering events that you were talking about at the earlier mileage?
I said no difference. The odometer mileage is the odometer mileage is 36.
So I guess what I'm asking, sir, is the 36 miles, is that within the range of the 2 triggering events that you were just talking about?
Yes, it was.
Within your report and your analysis, did you come up with sort of label these 2 different triggering events that you observed?
Yes, I did.
That incorporated the mileage, is that correct?
Correct.
That was, again, 12,629, is that correct?
Yes.
Any further label that you put on it? How did you label it?
I labeled them as in when they occurred. One's 12,629A and the other one's 12,629B.
The A and B, which one occurred first?
The A occurred first.
Do you recognize that?
I do. It's the data chart from the 12,629 miles A chart.
So with the document before you, what's now up on the screen, do you recognize that as what's now been marked as the next exhibit?
I do.
Is if you could describe to the jury what these rows indicate, what information is there, and if you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what of significance you observed in this 12,629 miles A.
Okay. So each row, starting from the top, is the vehicle control history time, which is the time that's recorded in the module itself or in the software that gets recorded as each time, and it's recorded as seconds. This time is the time from the start of the key cycle. So it starts off with 652.8, and each one is incremented in approximately half-second increments up to, let me show it, right here where the trigger, this is what's called where the trigger happened. So right here is where it goes from 4.5 to 4.6, then it goes up to 5, then everything after that is about half-second increments from each other. Recorded 10 seconds of time, which is labeled in this one, total time of 10 seconds. I'll just put time from trigger, just label it back to, here's the trigger right here, and that's the time between each one. Sorry if I can read this right. And right here, this is the vehicle speeds. The blue is just labeled because that's the speed. Zeros are labeled as a light blue is 0. So if I could read this. So it starts from, and shows that the vehicle is traveling at 9.9 miles per hour. It's slowing down to about 0 right here, and then stops for that time, and then increases back, speeds back up to. It goes up to 6.2, and then slows back down to 0, and then back up to 1.7 to, I think it's 8.7. I can read that right. Next below 4 is just miles per hour to kilometers. This is the accelerator opening ratio, which is really where this trigger comes from, because the trigger is labeled as the accelerator pedal opening angle is medium to higher immediately after shifting to reverse. All right, they label it as R.
If I could stop you there just
Yep.
for a second, sir. The accelerator pedal opening angle. Can you explain to the jury what that term means and how that relates to the operation of the vehicle?
The accelerator pedal is the part where everybody puts the foot on and gets the vehicle to go. The pedal, so this is what's showing how far the pedal was actually pressed by the operator of the vehicle. That gives you a percentage of that. So if it was zeros not pressed and 100%, it's all the way down. So they label the trigger, I think 30% is medium to higher. This way Toyota labels it. So then that's where you'll see the trigger is around 31.5%. It also shows start from the beginning, goes from 0 and increases up to 50.5%. That's 5 seconds. That's only a little over a second past the trigger. It's up to 50% and then back off, and then back onto the accelerator again, up to 34%.
This data is concerned for the VCH data from the Toyota text, what information are you able to glean, directionality, forward, reverse, left, right, things like that from this data?
So on this label right here, so it shows the shift position signal. 1 is forward and 2 is reverse. So this right here is showing the vehicle was in drive and going forward. Then the vehicle got shifted into reverse and then back to drive again.
Your experience from your training when it comes to interpreting this type of data, do you have any opinion as to what type of maneuver or what type of actions the vehicle was taking during the course of this triggering event?
Yes, this appears the vehicle was slowing down and making a U-turn. Because also the other thing into it, it shows steering signal. The steering wheel still showed that she was driving left and then right and the back left again. Also, when she's on the brake switch.
And Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Now, do you recognize that?
Yes, that's the data chart from my report for as labeled as 12,629 miles B.
So that's the second triggering event within this same mileage reading on the odometer, same key cycle?
Correct.
And for the sake of taking the best use of our time, if they're in evidence for the rest of this afternoon, both of you can then just ask to, just go ahead and put them up and not ask for permission.
Do you recall you recognize it now?
I do.
This is the VCH data chart from that same mileage or the second triggering event, the 629 miles peak, correct?
Correct.
Again, this is in the same odometer range as well as the same key cycle as what was just up on the screen, 12,629 miles A, correct?
Yes.
This occurs after A, is that fair to say?
Correct.
Similar to before, when it comes to this VCH data up on the screen, if you could, using the laser pointer, demonstrate to the jury what is significance as with this data.
So for this one, same label as before, just that vehicle control history time is, if I can see that, the trigger time is 1,142.2 seconds after key cycle. And this one shows all the same thing, 10 seconds of data. And what's good, so the vehicle speed on this one shows that she's slowing down. It's 13.7 miles per hour and gets down to 0. And then she's down to 0 for a while. And then the vehicle speed increases up to 24.2 miles per hour at its max speed. Then it goes down to 23.6 as the last two labels. The accelerator pedal angle at this point at key trigger is 36.5 and increases up to 74.5%. It stays around 74.5%, 74, 73.5, and 74.
So that's 74.5% the pressure being applied to the accelerator pedal, correct?
Correct.
That's 74.5, that's about 3/4 down, is that correct?
Yes.
With regard to this data from 12,629 miles B, what are you able to tell from this data when that occurred in relation to 12,629A?
They occurred about approximately 8 minutes. So 1269A occurred 8 minutes prior to the other one, and they both occurred within on the same odometer mileage.
The duration of the data that you were able to obtain from this one, specifically 12 miles B, what kind of duration of data are we looking at in this particular table or chart?
Say that again.
How long a period of time does this depict?
So this is from the start of key cycle, or this whole, just this one?
Just this one.
Okay, so this is 10 seconds of data.
And that 10 seconds of data, the 24.2 miles per hour, when does that occur within the 10 seconds of data for this particular event?
So the 24.2, as I'll point out, is right here. It's actually around the 9-second mark.
Similar to the other charts for A that was up on the screen a moment before, is there an indication of the accelerator pedal opening angle?
Yes.
What significance does that have, or what does that indicate to you from this data on the screen?
It shows that the accelerator pedal angle went up to 74.5%. So as out of 100%, it went up to 74.5%.
For this, what data is contained within this chart in respect to that?
Yeah, so on the bottom row, it shows the steering signal. It's just slowing down zeros like 0.5, 9, 13.5, 13.5. I think it's 13.5, 0, 4.5. We're talking about steering wheel. How far does the steering wheel move from left to right? So that's the degrees of a steering wheel angle.
When the vehicle is shifted from drive or neutral or park or whatever it was, at some point is there an indication in this data set on this table when the vehicle was placed into reverse?
Yes.
How far into this 10-second data set was the vehicle placed into reverse?
At 4 seconds, it's right here.
Am I correct then that there is a 5-second difference between 4 seconds when it's placed in reverse and 9 seconds approximately when it achieves that 24.2 miles per hour.
Correct.
The 74.5% pressure that's placed on the accelerator pedal, when is that recorded in seconds in relation to the 10-second data set in this table?
74.5 starts at the 8-second.
This trigger is concerned, I understand from your testimony that the maximum speed is 24.2, is that correct?
Correct.
What is the vehicle speed recorded at the end of this 10-second data set?
23.6.
Now, the vehicle being in different sets, drive, reverse, things of that nature, what did you observe within this data set, how it is at the beginning, how it changes at all, what happens with regard to that in the data set?
So this one shows that the vehicle was in drive. It starts off in drive. It's slowing down to 0. It goes to 0, which is neutral, then goes down, then it goes into reverse. So it's going straight, it stops, then gets placed in reverse, and then goes back, goes in reverse.
The reverse is concerned. You indicated there's also some steering angles that are recorded with this data.
Yes.
What was recorded in this 10 seconds of data? Specifically, I'm asking from the time that it goes to reverse to the end of the set, the end of the data set. What do you observe with reference to the change in the steering angle of the steering wheel?
It does not change much. It's only 13. I think the far it goes is left is at 13.5%. So that's only, if a steering was a circle, the whole circle is 360 degrees. So 13.5% is only, and it's still fairly straight in the vehicle and at 13.5%.
So from this data, this vehicle is backing up in the manner of about 5 seconds or so in a fairly straight line and achieves a maximum speed of 24.2 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
Even at the end of this data set, the vehicle is still traveling approximately 23.6 miles per hour.
Correct.
The small deviations in the steering that you were testifying about, based on your training and experience, what would cause
The steering wheel was obviously caused by operator traveling only a small amount, about right up to here. So it's only just operator steering at those small deviations. Yep, I do.
Now, what do you recognize that to be?
It's a more of a closer up snippet of that document that I have attached to my report.
What's depicted up on the screen is that as this next exhibit, if you could, using the laser pointer, just direct the jury's attention to what you observe in this portion of the data set.
Yeah, so I circled in here the drop from 24.2 to 23.6, and also the steering wheel signal went from a left at 4.5 to a right 4.5, so positive to a negative. Also the same thing with the opening ratio kind of stays consistent at 74%.
Do you recognize that?
I did. It's a vehicle control history distance chart I calculated and attached to my report.
Paul, do you recognize the screen?
I do.
This table and this information up on the screen, I should have asked you this before. How was this table created and what does this illustrate?
Yeah, so this illustrates from the chart of 12,629B. I started from when the vehicle was placed into reverse. When it immediately goes from 0, travels up to 23.6. Just that's like the last part of that last chart we had.
What were you able to do? Distance travel, and how were you able to determine that?
So I used this vehicle speeds and the time and calculated a distance that the vehicle traveled during this time.
The total distance traveled from the 0 to the 23.6 at the end, what was the total distance there?
97.35 feet.
The vehicle's maximum speed, 0.2 miles per hour, that's recorded within this data set. How much distance had the vehicle traveled prior to achieving that 24.2 mile per hour?
62.51 feet.
Paul, with regard to, based on your training and experience, this type of data and crash reconstruction in general, this particular set of data, who's the name, from 12,629 miles B, what type of collision is that data set consistent with and why?
Yeah, there's a point there where it appears to be consistent with a pedestrian strike.
Why is it that your interpretation of that data you feel is consistent with the pedestrian strike?
It's the sudden change of speed at 24.2 to 23.6 in a half second, while the accelerator pedal is still at a consistent 74%. Also, the steering wheel angle goes left at 4.5 degrees and also goes right to 4.5 degrees and then goes back to left after that. So right at that spot is something that's consistent with a pedestrian strike.
Mr. O'Keefe, the pedestrian in this collision, what data were you able to see or review in relation to your reconstruction analysis in this case.
Say with
Mr. O'Keefe, what did you learn about his injuries?
like what types of injuries he had?
Yes.
Yeah, there were blunt force injuries. I mean, it was abrasions or lacerations and blunt force injuries.
The injuries that you observed or that you were informed about, you learned this from the medical examiner, is that correct?
Correct.
And the injuries that Mr. O'Keefe was recorded as having sustained, according to the medical examiner, what relationship did those injuries have to you in relation to a pedestrian collision?
Sorry, say it again.
The injuries that you were informed by the medical examiner that Mr. O'Keefe had sustained,
Yes,
what relationship did those injuries have in relation to a pedestrian collision?
they are consistent with a pedestrian collision.
How?
Due to, you can break down each injury, to the arm, with the lacerations of the arm from the tail light, the dent where the scratches for his hand could be. Those are something that would be consistent with this, in this particular case, with striking the Lexus.
Specifically with reference to this case, what analysis did you conduct with regard to kinematics?
Yes, I did a kinematics analysis in my report. Kinematics deals with the aspect of motion.
I'm sorry, if you could expound
Yeah.
upon that just a little bit and explain to the jury what a kinematics analysis is.
So kinematics analysis is, like I said, it deals with the aspects of motion. Pedestrian crashes get labeled in certain types of how they interact. So in this particular case, I labeled it as it's a forward projection crash with a side swipe. What I mean by forward projection means that when a pedestrian gets struck by a vehicle, basically their principal impact forces are above the pedestrian center of gravity, as in this case where you get the higher back of the vehicle. When you get struck by something like that, it projects you forward in the direction of the vehicle. In this situation where he gets more struck through the side of the vehicle along the taillight area, that it projected him to forward and to the left due to this, like more of a side swipe manner.
You mentioned the height of the vehicle, the shape of the back of the vehicle. What, if any, relationship does that have in regard to you sort of labeling this as a forward projection / side swipe collision?
Due to it being pretty flat, the front of the vehicle where you have the hood and the pedestrian staying above the hood, it's the back of the vehicle. It's pretty flat and it's pretty higher up.
Now, you also made aware through your review of the medical examiner's report that there was injury to the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head.
Yes.
Based on your training experience, in particular to pedestrian collisions, what significance did that have in relation to your opinion as to how Mr. O'Keefe interacted with the defendant's vehicle?
Yes. When you look at the damage, he would have interacted with that left side of the vehicle. When he got struck by the vehicle on the left side, it would have caused his vehicle to rotate kind of counterclockwise. And when that rotation, he could turn it into his back, and his back could have struck the ground. I noted at the scene that there was asphalt curbing, which could have, somewhere he could have struck his head in there, or somewhere along any of the pavement would have caused damage. Most forward projection crashes have damage on both sides of the body.
Why is that?
Due to them get projected forward, so they get hit from behind, they would have damage to the back, and when they get projected forward, they get damage to the front. So in this case, he got projected and got spun counterclockwise due to where he got impacted the vehicle.
To the vehicle speeds, kinematically speaking, from your analysis in respect to that, what can you say in relation to, just in general terms, pedestrian collision is concerned, how much of that vehicle speed would a pedestrian be assuming in the context of a pedestrian collision with forward projection?
Forward projection will have almost 100% speed post-impact. More, like I said, in this case, it's more the fact that he didn't get 100%, like his center of mass didn't strike the vehicle, so he would not have been thrown 100% of the vehicle speed post-impact. His right side would have sustained the vehicle speed, and that would cause him to spin out. So as opposed to traditional forward projection, if he was right there in the middle of the vehicle, he would have got projected forward, and he would have sustained, his full body would have sustained the vehicle speed.
Is that abnormal, the forward projection type of pedestrian collision? What I'm going to ask is specifically to not having any contact with the bottom of the vehicle or being run over or something like that. Can you expound upon that a little?
Yeah, due to the side swipe manner that projected him off to the left, it wouldn't show that he would have been, the car would have ran over him and traveled over him. Like traditional,
Yeah,
the car
and
would,
I'm going to ask you to slow down just a
Sorry.
little bit. Too,
sorry.
okay?
Yes, so due to the situation in this scene where he got projected to the left and body rotated, it would have rotated away from the vehicle, and his body would not have traveled under the vehicle, as you do in like a lot of traditional forward projection crashes. The vehicle would get tracked forward ahead of the vehicle. That vehicle could possibly travel over that pedestrian.
So that is not what you found in this particular pedestrian collision, correct?
Correct.
I know you've mentioned it a couple times, but if I could ask you to just expound a little bit when you're talking about center of mass and how that relates between a pedestrian and a vehicle in a pedestrian-type collision.
Pedestrians, almost every object has a center mass. Pedestrians is the same. So a pedestrian center mass is essentially obviously the half the body, and you would also put down is around the chest area, just below the chest area would be a center of mass for a pedestrian, and they all range based on height and body shape.
So where on someone's body typically would a center of mass be located?
Usually just around the chest area or just below the chest area.
If I could turn your attention, Trooper Paul, back to February 1st of 2022, when you were at the Canton Police Department. You mentioned that, or you testified earlier at some point that you went outside to an asphalt roadway surface and conducted some forward acceleration and rear acceleration braking tests, correct?
Correct.
In addition to that, what other testing did you do that vehicle on that particular date in that location?
We checked the cameras, and we did backup visibility analysis with the cameras and the vehicle.
Again, if you could, just in general terms first, just describe for the jury when you say visibility analysis, typically speaking, what are you doing in a visibility analysis?
In the visibility analysis, we are trying to see what an operator would see in their vehicle. Looking for, in this particular case, we were trying to see if the operating vehicle would be able to see a pedestrian behind the vehicle. Also in this, where we have backup cameras, we're trying to look at the cameras and see what would the cameras pick up as we go into reverse.
In fairness to the defendant, at this particular time when this visibility analysis was conducted, it was during the daytime, is that correct?
That's correct.
Your understanding of the crash is that it occurred at night, correct?
Correct.
The visibility analysis, typically, would you be looking to recreate as close as you can to the conditions at the time that the collision occurred?
In most typical cases, yes.
Why were you not able to, were you?
We were not.
And why?
Due to, like I said, it's mostly done when we're trying to see what an operator would see a pedestrian. It's mostly done because it's an accident, but a lot of times when it's like an intentional act, visibility is not an issue in this situation. We were just want to make sure that the cameras worked and the backup sensors all worked in the vehicle.
This particular visibility analysis that was conducted in this case, how, if at all, was that memorialized?
It was recorded when the crime scenes trooper recorded it.
So I'm showing you a series of 7 photographs. Ask you to look at those. And first, I'm just going to ask you generally if you recognize those.
Yes.
What do you recognize those to be?
It's the inside of the vehicle. Appears to be taking out the infotainment system. Infotainment system.
The last photograph there, what does that depict, sir?
That is the module for the infotainment system.
What involvement did you have in respect to this investigation in regard to the...
I didn't have anything. That was Trooper Nick Marino's did the infotainment system in this vehicle.
You indicated earlier in your testimony that you had training as it relates to BODE, correct?
Correct.
What relationship does BODE have with the infotainment system?
They had tools to forensically diagnose the infotainment systems.
Are you familiar with whether or not that was able to be accomplished in this particular case?
It was not.
Do you know why not?
Because they had to go to, I think Burla didn't have the equipment, so they went to a...
Sustained.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Those photographs, they're an accurate portrayal of what you observed in the vehicle during the time that you were conducting your testing.
Yes.
Trooper Paul, do you recognize what's up on the screen and is now been marked as Exhibit 597?
Yes.
What part of the vehicle are we looking at in this photograph?
That's the steering wheel.
Trooper Paul, do you recognize what's now up on the screen?
Yes, I do.
If you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what significance you observed in this part of the photograph.
That is the infotainment system.
The infotainment system, when you were operating that vehicle, what was displayed on that screen within the infotainment?
If you were in drive, it just had the radio navigation stuff. But if you're in reverse, that's where the backup cameras and sensors would be.
Paul, do you recognize what's up on the screen?
Yes, I do. That's the push button start, the ignition.
So that's how this vehicle is started and stopped, essentially, as a push button start, is that correct?
Correct.
On the screen, as
Yes.
you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what, if anything, you observe of significance.
This infotainment system, it's on, shows satellite here. Looks like that's the navigation.
If I could take you back just for a second to the VCH data and the kinematics of what you were testifying about just a moment ago. You had mentioned that the injury to the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head that is consistent or could have been caused by striking his head on part of the pavement or the curbing, is that correct?
Correct.
Your training and experience in pedestrian collisions that you've responded to and investigated on prior occasions, weather, the coldness of the ground being frozen, what impact did that have in relation to the injuries to the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head?
Objection.
Sustained.
The visibility analysis that you were conducting on February 1st. You mentioned that was memorialized with photographs as well as video, is that correct?
Correct.
And the interior of the vehicle, exterior of the vehicle, or both?
I believe it might have been just the interior.
You recognize those?
Yes.
Those are the recordings of the visibility or the braking and acceleration tests from February 1st, both interior of the vehicle, exterior of the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm showing you another series of
Yes, I do. And those are photos from the backup cameras and sensor tests.
Trooper, if you could, please describe to the jury what we're looking at in this photograph.
Yes, this is the view from the operator as they would turn around and look to the back of the vehicle. Yes, that's the view inside the vehicle showing the infotainment system and the backup cameras on it.
The backup cameras on this particular vehicle, what kind of view was able to be portrayed, or what did you observe on the screen when you placed the vehicle in reverse?
Yes, this has the straight backup camera and also has a 360 overhead view of the vehicle.
The cameras within this vehicle are concerned. Are we talking about one single camera, or how many cameras are encapsulating this 360-degree camera angle view?
It has the front and the sides and the rear cameras.
Using the laser pointer, just draw the jury's attention, direct the jury's attention. The screen is concerned in that camera angle view.
Okay. So the one on the left, that's the backup camera, and the one in the middle here would be the 360 overhead camera.
In addition to what's depicted on the screen right now, the vehicle on the 360 overhead. As the vehicle travels, what in addition is depicted on that particular portion of the screen, the 360 overhead?
It shows a sensor, and also when that sensor shows up in the area where the object that it gets closer to.
The sensor that you're talking about, how is that depicted on the screen?
It's a little red like blip or little bar that would show up on the camera itself.
Is that something that appears as you approach an object from either in front or behind or something else?
Correct. As you approach the object, the bar will blink and will go get faster as you get closer to the object.
The system overall, in addition to the visual cues depicted up on the screen, what auditory cues are also part of this system?
It will beep at you, and it will, as you get closer to the object, it will beep faster as you get closer to it.
Getting closer to an object, the beeping that you're talking about, it increases in speed or rapidity, is that correct?
Correct.
What does it do with the volume of the beeping that you?
I guess it would increase as it would get faster.
So it gets faster and it gets louder as you get closer
Yep.
to an object, correct?
Yep.
The middle of the screen here, up on the dashboard. What you observe there, could you direct the jury's attention to what devices are up there right now?
Yes, right here, this blue device, that's the V-Box Sport that attached to the windshield.
So that's something that you attach to the vehicle. It's not necessarily something that was in the vehicle when you began to operate it around.
Yes.
Trooper Paul, if you could describe to the jury, or using the laser pointer, if you could, draw the jury's attention to what is significant to observe in this portion or closer up image of the screen in the center console.
Yeah, this is the one on the left here is the backup camera, and the one in the middle is the 360 overhead camera. Bars and lines are showing the path of the vehicle.
Trooper Paul, during this visibility analysis that you conducted, you testified earlier that you were primarily concerned with whether or not the cameras and the auditory and visual cues worked properly with this vehicle and this system, correct?
Yes.
During the course of your running these forward and back, reverse acceleration, braking tests, as well as the visibility analysis, what did you observe with relation to the functionality of the cameras and the visual and auditory cues?
Everything seemed to be working properly.
When you were operating the vehicle on February 1st and you shifted the vehicle into reverse, what would then occur with the screen in the center of the dashboard?
It would change from the navigation to the backup cameras.
How long a period of time did that take? You shifted from drive to reverse on a number of different occasions while you were conducting your test, correct?
Yes.
So how long a period of time are we talking about between the time that you shift the vehicle from drive or another gear to reverse for those screens to then display both the rear backup camera and the 360 overhead view?
It's fairly instantaneous, fairly quick.
During the course of the visibility analysis specifically, what did you place behind the vehicle during your visibility analysis?
It was like a punching bag dummy
Where did you place that in relation to
along the right rear.
that punching bag dummy was concerned? About how far up off the ground was the top of that?
I'm not exactly sure the exact height of it. Maybe my height or taller.
With respect, your height, sir, how tall are you?
5'6".
So it was at least 5'6", if not taller, is that correct?
Correct.
That, placing it behind the vehicle, after it was placed behind the vehicle, at some point were you inside of the vehicle?
Yes.
When you were inside of the vehicle and that was outside of the vehicle, what visual observations were you able to make? Its placement, and it's in the right rear passenger side of the vehicle, is that correct?
Correct.
So what observations were you able to make that item or exemplar that was placed out there?
It would have been invisible in the cameras.
When I say exemplar, so exemplar pedestrian, can you explain what that term means and how it relates to a visibility analysis?
So an exemplar pedestrian is, just like you said, we used a punch bag dummy. It was something that we used in place of a pedestrian to act like a pedestrian.
When that exemplar pedestrian was placed in the rear passenger side area of the vehicle, what instructions did you observe just from a visual perspective, turning your head or looking or cameras or anything else where that exemplar was placed?
There were no obstructions.
If that exemplar was placed directly next to the vehicle versus feet away from the vehicle, what difference did you notice? Visibility was concerned with.
Yeah, so if it was placed right next to the vehicle, it'd be blocked by the back pillar of the vehicle. If you placed it like 5 feet away, you would be able to see the dummy in the cameras and also in the side mirrors.
So at a distance of at least 5 feet, it was fully visible from where you sat in the vehicle?
Yes.
With respect to, just for orientation purposes, if you could explain to the jury where we are in relation to the Canton Police Department and where it was that you conducted these tests.
Yeah, so this is a view from the back of the Canton Police Department. So as you look at the Canton Police Department, we'd be on the left side of the Canton Police Department.
The vehicle in question, if you could, using the laser pointer, just direct the jury where that is and where it's going to be in relation to the
The vehicle is right here.
If I could ask you to pause there for just a moment. Would you recall during these testing that you were conducting here with the acceleration, reverse braking, all of those things, the highest speeds that you recorded during the course of that testing was 30 miles an hour, is that correct?
Yes.
And the highest speed that was contained within that VCH data for the second or the B of those two data sets, what was the highest miles per hour there?
24.
Now, with respect to the braking in this vehicle, what, if anything, was this vehicle equipped with?
Had ABS brakes, anti-lock brake system.
And with relation to anti-lock brake system or ABS, what, if any, relationship does that have with regard to braking and what is then visible on the pavement?
It doesn't leave visible tire marks.
And why is that so?
Due to when the brakes, as the brake is about to lock up, it transfers over to another tire. So it kind of rotates between tires. So the tires never fully lock up and slide across the pavement.
Now, in relation to ABS not leaving marks on the pavement, what, if any, relationship does that have as far as the sound difference between ABS brakes and non-ABS brakes?
Yeah, the sound would be different because you would hear a car sliding across the pavement as opposed to just hard braking and engine slowing down.
As far as sort of screeching of braking and tire coming to a brake, what would you expect to hear with respect to ABS braking?
There would be no screeching of the tires.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could press play from here. Thank you, Mr. Clement. Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish what's up on the screen, if you could, just using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to the screen in the center of the dashboard, what different parts of the screen are visible here.
So right here is the reverse camera, 360 camera.
This particular portion of the interior of the vehicle, are we looking at what was done with regard to acceleration or braking tests, or are we looking at the visibility now?
This is the visibility analysis.
This is a closer-up image of the screen that was visible in the center of the dash of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes.
If you could, using the laser pointer, direct the jury's attention to what you observe on this screen while the vehicle's in reverse now, correct?
Correct.
If you could, direct the jury's attention to what you observe on this screen as the vehicle's in reverse with the exemplar pedestrian behind it.
Yes, this screen has now changed to a park assist screen, and it now shows a sensor for the back of the vehicle. Also, same here, the sensor starts popping up in a yellow line further behind the vehicle.
The actual camera view.
The actual camera view shows that's where our puncher bag dummy was, and also shows where the sensor's backed up to on the bottom here.
At some point, in the course of your investigation or the course of this case, did you become aware of ring videos from Mr. O'Keefe's residence at 1 Meadows Avenue?
Yes.
Specifically, have you had occasion to see a video depicting the defendant backing out of the garage as snow was coming down?
Yes.
I'm going to allow it.
Yeah.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, if I could publish to the jury with the witness on the stand, Exhibit 6, video number 153.
Objection, may we approach?
Yes. A few things. So I'm going to send you home for the day because the lawyers and I are staying, and Trooper, I'm going to ask you to stay. Sometimes when we take these breaks, when I talk to the lawyers and then don't schedule you, it's because we have to do things in the case to facilitate getting this case to you now as efficiently as possible. Next week, we will be in session here Monday. Tuesday is going to be a full day of the lawyers and I with witnesses to make sure that the case is ready for you to wrap up. So Tuesday you will be off, we'll be working. Wednesday is a federal holiday, so court is not in session on Wednesday. We have a full day Thursday and half a day Friday. It's a little different than we looked at, but I am assured that we are still on schedule to getting the case to you folks, begin your deliberations sometime that last week in March. Okay? So we appreciate everybody's patience. I appreciate the lawyers now really trying to work to get this case to you as efficiently as possible. So we will see you on Monday. Monday will be a full day. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
All rise for the court.
Trooper, we're going to have a voir dire of you, sir. Mr. Lally's going to ask you some questions. Mr. Jackson's going to ask you some questions. You'll be shown a video.
Trooper Paul, as I was asking you before, have you had occasion to see a ring video from Mr. O'Keefe's house on 1 Meadows Avenue depicting the defendant's vehicle backing out of a garage while snow was falling?
Yes.
You made observations of the defendant's vehicle in the Canton Police Department garage on February 1st, is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, you play the video at this time.
Yes.
Your Honor, the safety.
I want to see it for purposes of this voir dire. And in fact, I'd like to see the version that the defendants have with the focusing in on the tire.
Understood.
Both. Go ahead, Ms. Gilman, you show yours, and then I'm going to ask for the defense.
Trooper, from your observations from this video, at some point, this vehicle either comes close or makes contact with Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, is that correct?
Yes.
In addition to your observations of this video and your observations of the defendant's vehicle, at some point, have you also seen photographs of Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle?
Yes.
Is your understanding that those photographs of Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle were taken by State Police Crime Scene Services on February 3rd, is that correct?
Yes.
With reference to your observations in this vehicle, what I'm going to ask you is in regard to the significance observed, significance of the impact between the two vehicles. In respect to Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, what did you observe on his vehicle at that time?
At the photos or now?
Right now.
Oh, right now. There was snow on the vehicle.
And the contact between the defendant's vehicle and the victim, Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, what did you observe to occur with relation to the snow based on the significance of the impact between the two?
Snow doesn't move.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could press play at this time.
All right, can I see the other video, please? Yes, I think it's on, I know it's in evidence, but I think it's on your computer, your hard drive. All right, thank you.
Your Honor, if I could, there's just two photographs that I'd like to.
Sure. Before you do that, what is the exhibit we just saw through your IT person? What
Your Honor, it's
number?
the same exhibit. It has not been enhanced in any way. It was just magnified for purposes of this, of showing it. In other words, the magnification is not embedded in the video. It's
Okay.
the same video.
Okay,
We just magnified it.
okay.
Here you go.
All right, thank you.
Do you recognize what's up on the screen now?
Yes.
What are we looking at, and which area of the vehicle are we looking at?
The rear, sorry, John O'Keefe's car.
The driver's side, is that correct?
Yes.
What relationship does this portion of the vehicle we're looking at here have in relation to the video that we just watched?
It was faced. You see it
All right,
from.
what was the answer? I
It
didn't
was-
hear you.
Sorry, it was faced the same way you see the back left rear corner of the vehicle as you do in this picture here.
Sir, is this the same driver's side rear of Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle?
Yes, it is.
Your observations of these photographs, what damage did you observe to Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle in either the last exhibit or this exhibit itself?
There was no damage.
The damage that you observed to the taillight area of the defendant's vehicle, what opinion do you have as to the amount of force necessary in order to cause that damage?
Objection.
We need a foundation on this.
How many crashes have you investigated over your time with the cars unit?
I've been primary on 196 crashes.
I know I'd asked you before about pedestrian crashes. Fair to say most of the remainder, if not all the remainder, involved vehicles colliding with other vehicles.
Correct.
That experience in relation to vehicle crashes, what training or knowledge do you have in regard to physical forces of vehicles in a collision sequence, and what kind of damage you would anticipate?
So obviously, the higher the speed, the more damage. The lower speed, the less damage.
What, from the observation that you made in that video and the observations that you made of the defendant's vehicle, what you observed in the video, is that consistent with the damage that you observed?
Objection.
So I'm going to allow this for voir dire. I just need to hear this information.
Understood, Your Honor. Thank you.
It is not consistent with the tail light in this collision.
Why not?
For one thing, the collision, the tail light is, what I say, 42 to 50 inches off the ground. So that vehicle would have to have damage 42 to 50 inches off the ground, because they would have had to contact each other in the same distance from the ground, and there's no damage to that vehicle. So if the taillight breaks, it should leave some scratching, maybe a dent, some damage to that vehicle should have occurred.
I think you just answered it. So, Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle, what kind of damage would you expect from an impact significant enough to break the plastic on the tail light of the defendant's vehicle?
It'd be probably a higher speed than what we saw.
For purposes of the voir dire, I need to hear all of them. Go ahead.
A higher speed than what we probably would saw in there. If it's not, it was minimal. Maybe it would crack a tail light or something like that, but it wouldn't. The damage is different. Also, we have a bumper that's also in the way too.
To that point, Drew, but when it comes to a bumper, from a functional standpoint, what is a bump and what does it do to a vehicle in a collision?
The bumper is basically meant as another cushion to absorb the impact to another vehicle, from one vehicle to another vehicle. And it sticks out to also preserve whatever the tail lights and everything else and the damage on top of it.
So in order to experience responding and investigating collisions, specifically collisions between motor vehicles, the speed that you observed the defendant's vehicle traveling in that video, what relationship does that have specifically also as to the bumper, as to the damage that you observed to the defendant's vehicle?
So if you look at the defendant's vehicle, there is a scratch mark that is along the left side starts from her bumper around the rear. That could be consistently with his hitting his bumper. That would be around the same height level. He has a little ridge there on his bumper. So that bumper could have been hit that little ridge. Also, the bumper in itself, and here is a different material. Hers is a little lighter, like a glossy colored paint. This is more a duller flat finish. So it might have some, why it would show up on her bumper more than it would show up on his bumper.
Finally, sir, in your opinion, the damage to the defendant's taillight, is that something that could have occurred or could have been caused by the crash or the contact of the vehicles that you observed in that video?
Objection.
No.
Again, this is voir dire, Mr. Jackson, going here.
No.
Again, sir, why not?
For one thing, the bumpers, you have to go push through the bumpers in order to hit the taillight against the other vehicle. There's no damage to that, significant damage to a bumper in order to push back into the car.
And again, there was no snow on the vehicle by that Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle that even came off the vehicle that you observed during the course of that contact between the two vehicles.
That's correct.
I have nothing further on.
Mr. Jackson?
Did you ever put the two cars together?
I did not.
No, you didn't, did you? You never tested whether or not the SUV would match up with the Traverse, did you?
What do you mean?
You just said, oh, look, one of them has matte finish, one of them has glossy finish, so it couldn't have happened, right?
No, I'm confused by the question. I'm talking about the tail light. We're talking about the tail light. Are we talking about tail light? Or are we talking about the bumper?
Yeah, we were talking about the taillight.
So, one person at a time, you both are talking over each other.
You started talking about the bumpers.
Yes.
You said one has matte finish and one has glossy finish, right?
Yes.
And you said you'd expect one of them to like slide off of each other, and they could have done this and they could have done that, right?
Not slide off each other.
You were suggesting that the two cars wouldn't match up such that the taillight could make contact with any part of the Traverse. That's what you were suggesting.
I'm saying it didn't match up because there's no damage to the Traverse.
You didn't test whether or not the lens, the right rear lens on the SUV could match up to any part of the Traverse, right? Make contact, physical contact with it, right?
When I see a picture of the Traverse,
no?
when I see the picture
No,
of the Traverse,
this is a voir dire. I need the information, Mr.
you asked me a
Jackson.
question.
Yeah,
And I said when
yes or no question, Trooper.
I don't think so, but
Mr. Jackson, just for, there's no jury here. This is for purposes of what I have to rule on. The more information I have, the better off I am in being able to rule on it.
Let me take a breath.
So this is you trying to keep the evidence out. So you want to give me the information.
Understood. Did you or did you not ever do a test where you backed the Lexus up against the Traverse?
we did not.
Did you or did you not ever do a test where you put the two cars together and measured them?
No.
Did you ever measure the taillight of the SUV, the black SUV, against any area on that Traverse?
No.
Did you ever do any force multiplier tests to determine the forces necessary to crack the SUV's convex taillight?
No.
Did you ever do any testing to determine whether or not a plastic taillight, under how much pressure a plastic taillight would need to be subjected before it would crack?
No.
Did you ever do any testing to determine whether or not if a plastic taillight came in contact with a metallic portion of another SUV, whether it would leave any mark?
I haven't done any tests, and I've seen crashes where headlights have struck other vehicles. That's
Okay.
where the experience comes from.
Fair enough. But I'm guessing that those crashes are probably different speeds and higher speeds. Not this, right?
I've had multiple crashes at different speeds.
So, have you ever
Oh,
had
yes.
a crash where you've investigated, the Massachusetts State Police has been brought in to investigate a crash where the car was going in reverse at about a half a mile?
Half a mile an hour?
Whatever that was.
Are you saying the SUV Lexus is going half a mile per hour?
You're the reconstructionist. Give me an estimate of how fast you think that SUV was going at the point of contact with the Traverse.
Maybe like 1 to 2 miles per hour?
Okay, fair enough. Have you ever been called in to a crash, to investigate a crash, where the cars have collided at 1 mile an hour?
I've had pedestrian crashes that have been at a very low speed.
Okay, that wasn't my question. That wasn't quite my question.
Okay.
My question is, have you been called in to a crash involving two vehicles?
Yeah. I have seen testing for vehicles at low speeds. So next time I have been called to a crash, I go to fatality crashes. But I have seen testing for vehicles at low speed impacts, like just the bump.
This?
Yes.
Did you see any damage?
Yes. All right, minimal damage.
Right, in what circumstance? Minimal damage like, I don't know, like a cracked taillight.
No, like just a little bit of rub off on the paint. Yes.
You've certainly seen circumstances in which two cars come in contact and there's absolutely no physical damage to either car, nothing observable, right?
Have I gone to
Sure.
crashes that have seen no physical damage on a car?
or just in common sense, just everyday life, where one car backs into another car at the Jiffy Lube, makes contact and drives away, and there's no damage.
Not normally. It's usually something with car-and-car impacts.
Like, what's the something?
A crack or a paint, something, chip, scratches.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you put a piece of metal in that scenario, if you put a piece of metal, steel, right, against a piece of plastic, which one do you think is going to give way first?
You will still see some damage to both vehicles at a speed.
Which one would give way first?
Between metal, depends what speeds. And what we're talking about, you're just saying plastic and metal. You're giving a pretty general, broad plastic and metal analysis here.
You admit, you got to agree with me, that there are circumstances in which low speed, very low speed contact between two cars can certainly leave damage on one and not damage on the other, damage on both, or no damage on either one. Observe.
Yes, I just said in that situation where the scratch on the side of her car had a scratch mark and his doesn't appear to have anything.
You said under questioning by Mr. Lally that certain circumstances like this could lead to a lens material, right, plastic material cracking, right?
Say again, like at least.
Just a few minutes ago.
I'm just going to answer your question. Sorry, yes.
Mr. Lally asked you a question a few minutes ago, and you indicated that something might show up on a bumper, something might, like a taillight, might actually crack, correct? In a low-speed impact.
A taillight might crack in a low-speed impact?
Correct.
Yeah, it might crack.
Okay, now, Mr. Lally also said you saw this video where the cars come close to or make contact, right? That's how he worded it. Remember that?
Come close. Yep.
Which one is it? Did it come close or did it make contact?
I said it might. I don't know if that scratch from the side is. It's something that's consistent with the height of the bumper. Like I said, I didn't measure them side by side, but you can clearly see there's a scratch on the side, and that's something that looks like that would come back. So as I look at the bumper, and I see the bumper, and it has that little divot, and I look at her side of her car with that scratch mark, that kind of lines up a little bit of why that could be where that was from.
I thought you said there was no damage on that car, on the Traverse.
There is no damage. And that's why I went to why there's these two different paint materials there, that why one could have showed up on her car because it's that flat, the glossy paint on there, and it could have scratched on it, while you have something that's a little more rougher texture with like a flat color on there that wouldn't leave on there.
So you just described the circumstance in which two cars come in contact, you don't see any observable damage on one, and you do on the other. That's what you just described, right?
Yeah, and I suggested that when you asked me that a second ago.
Yeah. With regard to the video, let's get back to the question that I asked, which was, in that video, did the SUV come close to, or did it come in contact with the Traverse?
Again, I don't know, because I'm saying based off the damage that is something consistent with that. So most likely it did come in contact with the bumper to bumper, but I don't know definitively because there is no damage to his car, but it's something that could explain why there's a scratch mark alongside the right rear side of his car, or her car.
Did you see the tire move, sir? Did you see the wheel on the Traverse move in that video?
No, I couldn't see the wheel move.
I beg your pardon?
I didn't see it move. I mean, I didn't observe it moving. If it moved, I didn't observe it moving. I wasn't looking at the wheel.
When was the first time you saw that?
I don't really know. It's been a little while.
Well, I don't know what a little while means.
Like a year ago, I think.
Okay. So you saw that video a year ago. Did you put anything about that video in your report, which is wherever it is, right here? I'm looking at your entire CARS report. Yes. Did you put anything in this CARS report about watching that video?
No, because I watched the video like after the report was done. I watched it first time on court TV.
So who on court TV during this trial?
Like
Prior hearing?
No, when it was on TV at some point.
Okay. When did you and Mr. Lally have a discussion about you testifying about this video?
That was a couple weeks ago?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand.
A couple of weeks ago?
What's a couple of weeks ago? Is it 10 days ago?
Days ago? 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago? Couple?
Okay.
Two?
Where did you two meet?
At the DA's office.
Was that at your request or was that at Mr. Lally's request?
It was a pre-conference hearing, or pre-trial hearing.
Right. Well, those
Or pre-trial conference, sorry.
Done?
What's up? Yes.
We're talking over each other. I'm trying not to talk over you, Trooper.
I'm trying not either.
Let's both try harder.
Okay.
Set up the meeting.
From my pre-trial,
Yes.
okay,
Paul.
Adam Lally.
Who was at the meeting?
Everybody sitting right here.
Lieutenant Tully, you, Adam Lally. I'm guessing Miss Gilman was not there.
She was not there, correct?
Did Mr. Lally show you this video at that meeting?
Yes,
Did he tell you that he intended to ask you some questions about this video at that meeting?
yes,
Did he ask you whether or not you could render an opinion as to whether or not the impact that you saw or lack thereof, whatever the case may be, was consistent or inconsistent with damage to the taillight?
Yes.
Did you tell him that you would give him such opinion if called upon at trial?
Yes.
Did anybody take any notes?
I don't know.
Were you taking notes?
Yes.
Where are those notes, Trooper Paul?
I think I just, no, it's not on this specifically, but just make sure I had my everything checks and balance. And for what I want to talk about, what we're going to talk about.
Make sure you had
My
what?
checks and balances, sorry.
Checks and
Make sure I'm more on the same page of what we understand what's going on in the trial.
you want to make sure that you're on the same page with Mr. Lally about what's going on in trial. Right?
Yes.
All right. Did Mr. Lally take notes?
I have no idea. I wasn't paying attention to his note taking. I don't know. I don't know if people were taking notes, writing stuff down, what they're writing stuff down in relation to our little conference.
Did you give him an opinion? We've asked whether or not you were asked to give an opinion, and you said, yes, I was.
Yep.
Did you give an opinion at that meeting about whether or not you believe, in your opinion, the contact between me and the Traverse, the Lexus and the Traverse, could result in the damage to the taillight?
Yes.
What did you tell him in the meeting?
What we talked about already in the stand here.
Okay. So what you related to him was exactly what you've relayed in this court.
Yes.
All right. He told you that he was going to ask, I'm going to ask you to look at the video, correct?
Yes.
You're going to be asked a series of questions about that video, correct?
He told me the video and he said, okay, this is the video. This is what they think the taillight was broken. And these are the pictures of his car that they take. So they asked my opinion on, do you think that's where a taillight would be broken?
He said, and he told you, you need to make sure that you tell the jurors that couldn't have happened in this impact, right?
He didn't tell me I had to make sure jurors, that's my opinion on, it doesn't appear to happen in that video.
Did he tell you that it would be helpful to the prosecution if you said that it would be, that it was inconsistent with the taillight breaking?
Objection.
I'm going to allow it. Did he tell you it would be helpful to the case if you said that?
No.
But you knew it would be, right?
I'm just stating what I saw, my professional opinion on what it is. If it looked like it was consistent, I would say it's consistent. If it wasn't consistent, it's not consistent. I'm not going to.
I'm sure that's what you would say.
Okay, so comments are not appropriate for the jury. They're also not very good for me, Mr.
Understood.
Jackson.
Understood, Your Honor. Did you formalize your new opinion? Because this is a new opinion, right? You've never been asked this opinion before.
Yes.
Did you formalize this new opinion in any kind of report or memorialize it in any way?
No.
Did Mr. Lally ask you to create a report of some sort that you could then turn over to the defense so that we would know that you have a new opinion that you're going to testify about?
No.
Did you save those notes that you took about making sure that you were on the same page as Mr. Lally?
I saved they're my report. Yeah, as I was writing a report, I just highlighted stuff that I want to make sure I memorize and remember my report.
I'm talking about notes specifically about this video, seeing this video and rendering a new opinion about this video.
No, I didn't have notes specifically about this video. I didn't write anything down saying I must do this on this video.
Did you write anything down about the new opinion that you had come up with related to this video?
No, I did not.
And your opinion, ultimately, that you imparted to Mr. Lally in that meeting was that the car did not move and the snow did not move, correct?
Correct.
All right. Did you want to follow up at all, Mr. Lally?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
All right. So, Trooper, you are all set for today. We will see you Monday morning.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. So you're moving to exclude this. I'll hear you, Mr. Jackson.
Very clear that this is a blatant discovery violation. Commonwealth has at least the obligation to provide us with any new opinions that any expert is going to testify to on direct examination. They've known about this witness for not months, for a year, for a couple of years. They've known exactly what this witness has memorialized in his official report. They knew that the only thing that we had was the official report. They met with him 2 weeks ago. This has become a pattern of conduct by the Commonwealth over and over. We're finding these witnesses getting on the stand, finding out that there's been a sort of preemptive strike in some prep interview where they're coming up with new opinions, new conclusions, new facts. It happened with Jennifer McCabe, this new fact about going to Michael Lank's house. It happened with Officer Seraph, coming up with a new determination about what was said or not said at the scene that we had never heard before. That was also in prep session of some sort, or I believe it was. And this witness, literally, it's not even like just, was it light out or was it dark out? This is a completely new opinion based on evidence that we presented, both in or talked about in opening statement and have presented variously throughout this trial. This officer gets on the stand and now has a new central opinion about whether or not we're right, that taillight lens could be cracked. That's something that should have at least been reduced to writing. Even if it was reduced to writing, it should have been excluded because it's a discovery violation. It's late. We don't have time to prepare for it. We were caught off guard. I used the word at sidebar ambush. I know that rankles the court and the court doesn't like it, but that's exactly what it feels like.
That's been used both ways here, right? So it's a word, let's just take it out of here, make your point.
I'll see if I can come up with a synonym for it.
I understand your argument, so focus on, just continue where you were, but no comment whether I like ambush or don't like ambush. It's a word I've heard a lot on both sides.
I understand, Your Honor. My point is the evidence that now is being sought should never be presented in front of a jury. We didn't have opportunity to get this in advance. This has, it's at least, very least, been in the Commonwealth's possession for weeks. He took notes about it. He now says, I didn't take notes about that specifically. I don't believe that. I can throw him. I think he did take notes about it. He was shown the video. He provided a new opinion. Mr. Lally knew that he was providing a new opinion. Then the first time he discloses this opinion is in front of the 16 jurors. If we would ask for its exclusion, Your Honor. I'll submit.
All right, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor. The pattern, especially coming from counsel, I simply find it laughable. Officer Sarif, I think what counsel is referring to was testimony that was in his grand jury testimony. He was crossed about whether or not it was in his report, but it was in his grand jury testimony. As far as Ms. McCabe is concerned, that was regarding reciprocal discovery that was given to the Commonwealth weeks into trial by the defendant. It was then shown to a witness, which is perfectly permissible. Counsel asked a question of Ms. McCabe on cross, and she was aware of the material based on the late disclosure of reciprocal discovery. So there's no violation there. As it relates to why I say laughable, Your Honor, is that I am still...
I don't like hearing you say laughable. Just stick to what the arguments are. And
with this witness...
Hold on. Quit the finger pointing, name calling, things like that, please. I
Yes.
know it's been a long week. It's been a particularly long day. But just focus on what you want to argue to me.
I apologize to the court for that, Your Honor. This testimony is well within his realm as a crash reconstructionist. This is a witness who's responded to and investigated hundreds of crashes involving damage to vehicles. Is simply making an observation of contact between two vehicles or purported contact between two vehicles on a video. The force is self-evident, and whether or not that force is sufficient to cause the damage that he observed, personally observed on the defendant's vehicle is well within his expertise. And should be permissible for this witness to be able to testify to.
What about the non-disclosure to the defense? So showing this video and asking for an opinion, what about that?
Your Honor, what I would say is I did not show this video and ask this opinion. This is a video that actually the trooper mentioned to me that he had seen over the course of while the case was pending probably over a year ago. That he had seen that video. What I showed him was the photographs of Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle and asked whether or not he observed any damage consistent with the damage to the taillight observing or popping up on Mr. O'Keefe's vehicle.
Why wasn't that turned over?
In hindsight, it should have been, Your Honor.
All right. It's late. I'm not ruling here. I want to review everything. I would like, I'm not obviously taking any of the evidence home with me. I would like, if it's possible, for what your IT person did on the expanding, like he did, this second time, maybe I missed it, but I didn't see the tire move this time. I'd like that. I'd like that video, and I would like, what's the exhibit number here?
It's Exhibit 6. Do you want just that video, Your Honor?
The pictures of the cars, whatever was shown during this voir dire, I would like those emailed to me so that I can look at them this weekend while I'm deciding, or put them on a flash drive right now. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
We'll do a screen record and get it to the court by email. We can do that. I just need an hour once we get back to home base.
Okay. All right, Ms. Gilman, will you burn what you have for me before we leave somehow?
If I could, I just want to close one loop.
Okay.
What I was referring to with Ms. McCabe, I want to make sure that this is clear because this has come up a couple of times. The only thing I was referring to, or what I was referring to, it's not the only thing, but what I was referring to with Ms. McCabe is after Ms. McCabe testified, days and days after she testified and she was excused as a witness, then we got the report from Lieutenant Tully about the new information that she disclosed on the witness stand. In other words, she was cross-examined about it. etc. Then, after she testified and was cross-examined and gone, then we got a report that predated her testimony, that was in the possession of the Commonwealth, or at least in the possession of Lieutenant Tully. That's what I was talking about. I just wanted to make sure the record's clear. We don't need to go into it any further.
Did you want to add anything to that, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so I'll see you Monday morning.